what I started to learn is how my body, it deals with anxiety on a physical level. And so, from losing my ability to speak, for, a month or two where they thought I had like a stroke, and then having these severe muscle spasms where it seemed like I was having, seizures, and it's like you get tested for everything. It's like they check for cancer and they check for blood diseases and all that stuff. And everything kept coming back normal.
Well, welcome everybody to, I'm so excited to say this, Season 2 of Church Chat. This is a podcast where we have the conversations about ministry that you wish you were having. Maybe you don't wish you were having them, but these are important conversations that are not happening necessarily in our schools or our seminaries. Real life, real ministry, real people, real conversations about stuff that really matters for us as leaders. And I'm so pumped to be on here and start Season 2 off with this episode. My name is Josh Ott.
And I'm Emily, and today's guest is a diehard Cornhusker fan, and he's one of our next-gen cohort leaders, Trent Williams. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What I love about what I just learned about Trent is that he spent a lot of his time growing up in Ohio, but he is not an Ohio State fan, and that just brings such joy to my Pennsylvania heart.
The one thing that you may not like is that I like Penn State less than I like Ohio State. So I don't know how that works but it's friendly rivalries, right?
I wouldn't say friendly, but I guess this is a church chat podcast, so maybe
That's fair.
We'll lean towards friendly. It's so cool to have you on here, Trent, man. We're glad to be having this conversation. Just knowing the little I know about you through some mutual friends, I'm really excited about. It's easy to see how this conversation is going to help a lot of people.
For sure.
Yeah.
We're going to jump into this season's round of a game that I'm real good at. I'm really excited to beat Josh in this Season 2 of Two Truths and a Lie. So we like to intro every guest by having them share two truths and a lie.
While you're thinking about that, Trent, maybe you already thought about it. Did you actually tally the scores from last season, or are you just going on this assumption that you won? Because I don't remember.
Okay, I didn't officially tally, but I'm virtually positive I only missed one.
Well,
so
agree to disagree.
Maybe when we record the next one, I will have an official tally for you.
I feel like those numbers cannot be trusted.
Well, I do have the benefit of having deep dive people's social media accounts, which, fun fact about Trent, has pretty much no social media map. So that was really difficult for me. We learned right before we started recording that he was a Cornhusker fan. So, this might be difficult for me.
Right.
Church chat hosts are professional social media stalkers.
Yep, it's a gift.
For sure. It is. I don't think it's a spiritual gift, but it is a gift.
Mm-hmm. This is how I stay hidden.
Yes, smart man.
Lurking shadows. That's right.
You're jealous.
All right. So two truths and a lie. Oh gosh, this is a game I feel like I always struggle at coming up with good ones. All right. So number one, my wife and I regularly open up our house to strangers to stay with us for extended periods of time. I hold a state championship in bocce from the state of Ohio when I was in high school, and I have been skydiving.
Oh, this is so good.
How is this good?
Well, because it's difficult. And they're very interesting. So
these are very interesting answers. The bocce ball one is a little specific, and I don't know how I feel. Like, our school district local here just started a bocce ball team, but
that's so weird.
Was it around back when you were in school in Ohio? A bocce ball seems like
How
something
old do you
Ohio.
think I am?
I know.
Back when you were a young lad.
Bocce ball feels like a newer high school sport.
Well, it feels like an old retired person in Florida kind of sport. So
Man, I'm gonna kill it
I
at
don't know if it
bocce
helps that
ball.
I used to attend a regular Italian festival in Ohio on an annual basis.
okay,
I
you're
don't. I
learning
don't
all
think
these
that
new
helps.
things.
It
Well, is
I don't think
bocce,
that.
is that an Italian game?
is.
You're fishing for clues, Emily.
I was just trying to educate myself, Josh.
So you regularly open your house to strangers. Do you have children?
I do.
Since we're asking,
I've got 3 boys, and I've got
3
another
boys.
little one on the way next month. Yep.
Man, I
Wow.
would not be opening my house to strangers with little children around.
But what a weird thing to come up with if that's not true.
But that's like a, sorry, Trent, if this is the true one, but that's like the hippie pastor thing to say. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I was that guy. We had this. I don't know. Was he an angel or?
Oh my gosh.
You ever hear those stories?
Oh
You
yeah.
never heard those?
Oh yeah.
Are we going off the rails in church chat, season 2, episode
Yes,
1?
Clearly. Okay, well, I actually think I am going to go with the bocce. That was kind of my gut. I've already
Now
forgotten
wait,
the third
I'm not
one.
ready. I'm
What
not
was the
ready
third
to
one?
commit.
I've been
Oh,
skydiving.
skydiving. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's so short. It's such a short statement.
But it's
Sometimes
oftentimes
the lies
truth.
like to hide in the simplicity of things. I'm guessing my man Trent is more of a bocce ball, stay on the ground, act like an old person kind of dude. I think skydiving's a lie.
Okay, I'm going to say bocce. I'm going to stick with that.
Here's the deal. I am very much a stay on the ground, play some bocce, but I am not a state tournament champion in bocce at all. So sorry. Now, if I ever had the chance to play bocce for a school, I think I could win a state tournament. But that
Okay.
is
Like,
not
do you
something-
play in your backyard? Do you have?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we play bocce with my boys all the time in the backyard.
It's amazing.
That's pretty
love
cocky,
I,
Trent.
I'm just saying, I love bocce. And we're from
You're-
Ohio. We're good at weird sports, right?
He's like, if I would have won the state champion. I could have been on the Olympics
Bocce and cornhole. Yeah.
if I didn't twist my elbow in my,
Yeah,
junior year.
tendinitis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Tendinitis cut my bocce ball career short.
Okay, but
Yeah,
now
but,
we
no,
need.
but my wife's a big daredevil, and it was always her dream to go skydiving. So we went skydiving on our 1-year anniversary.
Wow,
Yeah, pre-kid.
that is huge.
It was awesome. It was a blast.
Way to step up.
You know, it was a good. And the strangers side of things, because you're probably like, what is my wife and I, we started doing foster care about 2 years ago. We've had the blessing of having we've had 13 kids in and out of our home in the course of the last about 2 years.
Wow.
And
That's
stuff.
so cool.
We were doing respite short term. Then we had a little guy with us for about 9 months. And so yeah, it's
Wow.
been
So
great
that was
to
a
see how
bit
God
of
did
a
that.
that was a bit of a trick question.
It was
too.
a little deceiving.
It was the
Because when you hear strangers, you don't think that you're taking in children. You know, you think of like,
Yeah, it's not a bunch of sketchy people just coming in and out of the house.
well, that's very cool fact about you. That's such an important thing. I know that there's like, I don't know, you're in Maryland, in Pennsylvania. I know there's like they're constantly trying to find. There's like a shortage of healthy people that are willing to open up their homes for kids like that. And I know a few people in our church have done it, and it's just pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible thing.
There was a window that opened up during COVID where you could basically do all your training online. And so we weren't expecting to be able to get to a place of doing it, but we're like, hey, I think we could do this. And so we were able to get trained and go through the process, and always would love to talk people, what does it look like to do it? Because a lot of people think they can't. And I just say, do it. Respite is, it might be a weekend, it might be a week. And it's like, you can handle a lot in 3 days or 7 days. And just the stuff that you kind of learn that God kind of taught us along the way has been amazing. It's been pretty transformative in our lives. So
How have your boys handled that?
they love it, honestly. It's like they get to have these sleepovers with new people and hang out. And so they've been really good. We've had kids from anywhere to 2 months old all the way up to 10.
Okay.
Really enjoyed it. Our last foster son that we had, he just left us not too long ago, and that was a hard goodbye. We had built a pretty big bond with him. They're learning a lot from it too. It allows us to have some really good conversations with them as we do everything. So yeah,
That's really, really cool. I really admired that. Well, we're going to jump in. We are excited to talk to you about leading through personal and professional hardships and how to minister to the next generation, because you are a longtime youth pastor. So we'll just jump right in.
You are coming up on 10 years. When's the
So yeah,
10-year
in
day?
June it was my 10-year mark in
June.
Tristate. Yeah, it's wild.
Wow. So what's the biggest thing you've learned in the last decade of student ministry? Man, so much has changed in the last decade of student ministry. 10 years ago seems like forever ago.
Yeah, it does seem like forever ago. Man, I feel like this is a question you can go, I feel like, so many different ways with. I think I'm going to answer it in two different ways. I'm going to answer from this dynamic of student ministry in general. I think one of the biggest things that I've been learning is no matter how much culture changes and shifts and looks different, the heart issues always the same. You're always walking with students and parents, typically in the same categories, where it's typically about the heart and about, who are you? Like, who are you at home? Who are you at school? Who, like, trying to sift through the different dynamics that kids will often present in different environments. As a youth pastor, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned, somebody gave me this really awesome piece of advice a couple years ago, and it basically was almost permission to be a different youth pastor. Because when you come out of the gate and you're young and you have all the energy to run and be crazy and do all the wild things that may build relationships with students early on, it's okay for that role to change and to basically recruit people to to do that for you. And I thought that was a good piece that I think gave me additional life in youth ministry, and recognizing it's okay to allow my role to be different over time.
Was that challenging for you to kind of change your perspective on leading?
Yeah, that dynamic, because again, you want to jump in still, whether or not your body can. But there is this element, like, you want to be the funny person, or you want to be the one that the students like because of your being crazy. And that's a little bit of my personality in general. Like, I like to have that role. But then, coming down to a place where it's like, no, I intentionally want to get to know the students in some of the crazier times. And so being able to have the side conversations and being able to go deeper, you realize that that's where the fruit is. And so it got to a point where it's like, well, that's where more of my joy comes from. Like, it's a blast playing games and stuff. And I still do. I still jump into all that stuff. But being able to step back and recognize, the more that I invest in the discipleship piece and train leaders to succeed, the more success we'll actually have. And so it has been really difficult learning, okay, what does that look like? Like, how does God want to use this in a way that, I'm not as familiar with? And I think that's just been a bit of an adjustment, but I think it's been really good. It's allowed me to go before God and constantly ask the question, like, what do you want from me? Like,
Yeah.
Where do you want me to be in this process of ministry? And I think it's been good.
How has the recruitment piece, like switching kind of that, is a big shift, especially in a culture where volunteers seem like harder and harder to get?
Yeah, that's a hard piece. We're still working on the recruitment side of it. I mean, honestly, it's genuinely difficult. One of the things I will say is I've gotten to a point where I'm more at peace if I can't recruit well, because it's like, well, we can only do what we can with what we have. I don't think I used to be able to have that mindset. That's been a huge shift in transition in just how I view ministry. Because it used to be like, well, we can't do anything. I don't have anybody. If we got into those places where it's still, we're constantly in a, leader crisis, honestly. But I feel confident with the leaders that I have. And I just tell them, listen, this is an opportunity for us to just invest with what we have. Let's just make sure we're obedient. Let's make sure we love on the students well, have intentional conversations. And so I've got some great younger leaders that have the energy and stuff. And, I've often find it's like, you don't even need tons of them, even just like one or two that are, able to go and do some of those things. It doesn't take much, but honestly, kids just want to be known. They want to be seen. And so your leaders don't always have to be crazy to have effective ministry. Sometimes I think we can get ourselves into a place where you think my ministry needs to look like this for God to work. And that's not realistic for everybody. And that's honestly it's not true. It's like, your ministry is going to be successful if God wants it to be successful. And if we choose to be obedient and moving forward in what God's calling us to with the gifts that we have, that's where the success comes. So it's easy. I think it's a dangerous thing in youth ministry sometimes to think youth ministry must look like this because I've seen youth ministry like this, or I was a part of a youth ministry that was like this and it was amazing. And so we try to replicate things. And I would say it's probably fair that a lot of people in youth ministry and church ministry in general would agree that there's things that used to be done that aren't successful now.
Mm-hmm.
They don't work. Always variables. There's just variables.
Have you experienced any pushback from higher ups about that shift just in your own ability to engage in certain ways? And I know you came from a much bigger church. So yeah, what have the expectations looked like for you? I think you've been there enough to experience kind of a shift.
Yeah, I've been really blessed, I feel like, with teams of people in ministry that are really encouraging from our elder board to our pastoral staff. We have a really good team dynamic within our staff. And so, oftentimes we're helping in the different areas of ministry. And so as long as there's an intention towards discipleship and growth, there's a lot of freedom, which I feel like I've been really lucky with. My previous church, I think there was a little bit more expectation on what things needed to look like. And that was a harder thing to operate in. Because sometimes it was, well, I feel like we should go in this direction. It's like, well, that's not what we're going to do here. And so there's constantly this tension. It's like, well, I'm invested in this ministry and I know what the students need. And yet sometimes there would be these moments where it's like, you couldn't do that because of that situation. And I've talked with other pastors, youth pastors that are in those situations where they feel like their hands get tied. And so even though they may know what they want to do, that may not be the full direction of where that church wants to take things. Mm-hmm. Those are some differences that we're starting to see in, I think, church culture, not just in, broad culture, but in church culture. You're seeing some of these tension pieces of church environments pushing to have a certain model because it's successful maybe in one state. Like if it's a multi-church plants and different things, that church model might work in Washington State, but it doesn't work in the Midwest. And so, but they're going to follow the model. And so I think sometimes people end up in jobs that are in those different places and they're seeing this model's not fully working. And yet there's this push to keep pressing into it. And so I think I've been lucky enough to have, especially at the church where we're at now, is, having the support of, we're going to try new things. And if they fail, and we'll try something new. And so there's a lot of grace in that area. Which is sure.
That's cool. Yeah, because I know, with youth ministry, many youth pastors start young. Your life stage is just different. And then you end up having kids and family and wanting to balance that. And then you're not as free to like grab coffee with people whenever or, so balancing that is difficult. And that often shifts the main focus into more of discipleship. And that can be difficult when people expect something else.
Yeah, that's a hard piece with having 3 boys and another one on the way. That's constantly a tension piece. And like, we're getting closer and closer to gearing up towards all the extracurriculars and like all of our kids do sports and all of that. And so I don't know exactly how that's going to impact things. We'll find out soon.
Yes.
I'd love to switch gears just a little bit. You've been really kind of open about some of the anxiety issues you've walked through. I have that part of me too. I've talked about that before on this podcast at my church. So I've had to sort through some of those issues too. And you've been through a lot during your time in ministry, plenty of challenges. Maybe you could talk just a little bit about some of the challenges you faced and kind of where it led you and how you worked through that.
Yeah. So, I've had a lot of anxiety had started, way into like high school, and I feel like it's typically the regular thing you hear in high school and middle school today. It's like identity issue. It's who am I? I'm like, I feel insecure. I feel like I'm not good enough. Like I know the things that I struggle with. And it's like, well, if somebody found out about the things that I struggle with, would they really love me for who I am? And yet the entire gospel message is all about, Jesus loving us where we're at. And yet there's this reality of, tension that comes with that. And so as I started to dive into, ministry, there was the peak of where everything hit. There was a number of things that I went through in college that were really, really difficult. Struggling from depression, and it got pretty dark. And as I had people kind of investing in me, I was able to kind of get out of some of those situations and kind of have helped to move away from some of the things that I struggled with. What I started to learn is how my body it deals with anxiety on a physical level. And so, from losing my ability to speak, for a month or two where they thought I had like a stroke, and then having these severe muscle spasms where it seemed like I was having, seizures. And it's like you get tested for everything. It's like they check for cancer and they check for blood diseases and all that stuff. And everything kept coming back normal. You start to feel like you're crazier, which doesn't help your anxiety. And so everything just compiles on it. And so we got to this moment where we're at our first church and we were feeling led to leave. And there was some tension that started to happen, within that job, and that led to some pretty difficult pieces. And in the middle of all of that, so we had just bought a house in Ohio that August. And I think it was that October, I just had feeling the sense of it's time to leave. And so I tell my wife, that's a great conversation to have.
Hey, honey,
it's time
this house,
yeah.
This house that you love that we just spent months picking up.
That's right. And she's like, what? Well, you just bought a house. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I think God's calling us, to go. And so we wrestled with that for a couple months, and it became more and more evident that it was time to go. Well, this lovely house that we bought flooded.
Oh, no.
Our pipes froze and burst, completely destroying our living room area. So not only have we been there for like 5 months, now we can't even use half of our house, and we feel like we're supposed to transition out. In the middle of that, we end up finding out we're pregnant with our first child, which was exciting, super amazing news. And moments before we did a Zoom chat with my wife's family, and we were about to tell them, hey, we're pregnant. Her parents decided to tell us that they've got news. And we ended up finding out that my mother-in-law had a terminal brain tumor and had probably about a year to live. And so now we've got that on top of life transition, possible move, new job. God really started to orchestrate things and show us what we were supposed to be doing, even though it seemed like this is going to be really hard. And so we eventually got connected with Tristate, moved out here to Maryland. And at this point, the market had gone up when we bought, and then it crashed when we tried to sell. And so we're trying to get rid of this house, and it just is not working. So it took us 2.5 years to sell. Flooded like 3 more times, multiple mold issues. I mean, you name it, we went through it. All while living here in Maryland. We've got this other property that's causing us all kinds of headache. We've got our firstborn son who eventually came in October. My wife's mom passed away that January following the birth. Everything's a blur. Like so much of my first year here at Tri-State is just like surviving. And so it was in the upcoming years that anxiety really just hit. And so I started getting seizure episodes and all these crazy different things. And long story short, that's a big hindrance, in ministry when you're having these seizures, you're having all these things that are starting to hit. And so there was a process that became critical of like, we got to get this fixed. Like we got to do something. And so having a pastoral staff, helping me get a number of areas of help to kind of recalibrate and stuff. God just started answering prayers. He started showing us and revealing us that there's a plan that he has for us that he's going to use with this. And so as I started to find health, getting away from probably some unhealthy habits of dealing with stress and anxiety, and finding freedom in a number of areas, it's been 2 years now since I've struggled with anxiety. I found people who were able to help me work through lies that I had been telling myself of, you're not good enough. Like, why are you even doing this? People are going to just see, like, I realized I had this fear of failing, like a constant fear of failing. I think people feel that regularly in ministry, as a husband, as, a friend, as a pastor, all the roles that we hold. We don't want to fail people. We want to be successful. And when you feel yourself kind of corroding, from the inside out, there's this element of fear that just escalates everything. And so
Yeah.
it's just this cycle that takes place, and you get caught up in all of these lies. And it's like you're kind of just in a dryer, just being tossed around, and you're like, you have no sense of what's up and what's down. And so in the midst of all that, God he's taken all of the stuff that I struggled with, all the like, I remember going through a counseling session, and she had me go through this, like, hey, let's rate your anxiety at this stage of life. And it's like, if you scored a 300, it's like you were going through some stuff. And it was like 600. And she's like, oh my word. It's like, yeah, it was like all within like 6 months of, to a year.
It's never awesome when you are shocking your counselor.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's never good.
Yes.
It's so interesting. If I could just, like, that part of our brain by God's design, like that kind of triggers that fight or flight. It gets inflamed, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm really excited about you talking about this. There's a whole lot of people in leadership in churches that struggle with anxiety in the dark, quietly, and maybe think there's something wrong with them, don't know how to handle it, don't feel like they'll be supportive. I love how your church supported you through that. And I also want to say, like, sometimes that part of our body that is fallen, right, like, gets just lit up. And we are in a profession that puts us pretty close to a lot of traumatic things. Not even talking about this kind of spiritual battle that we're in. So I just wanted to stop and be like, thank you so much for just sharing that part of your story. I think it's pretty powerful, and something that more and more leaders need to hear. Like, you're not alone if you are a leader in ministry and you're struggling with anxiety.
And it's interesting because it's like the number one question I get now is like, well, so what do you do? Like, how did you get out of it? Because honestly, I the part that became the danger in it is I accepted it. That was going to be who I am. I'm just going to be somebody who struggles with anxiety. And I hear this often. Like, you hear people are like, yeah, I don't know how to break from it. I was doing an internship in Colorado at one point, and the youth pastor there at one point, he just says, listen, you have the choice. You can either use your anxiety as a crutch the rest of your life, or you can hand it to God and know that he's bigger and can take it from you. And that was an eye-opening thing for me, because when I actually stopped and I examined how I used to operate, anxiety was my identity. It was the thing I could use to tell people, like, yeah, I can't tonight. I'm really struggling with anxiety. And so I don't want to do this. Or I'd find ways to just cut things out of my life so that I could just basically almost live in my anxiety. And anxiety became an addiction in and of itself. Now, I'm not trying to say that people struggle with anxiety. That's how they're operating. But Satan wants us to think that this is just how life is. Like, we can't find freedom from this thing. We can find freedom in maybe something else, but like this anxiety thing is just, it's a part of culture. Because almost feel like 80-90% of the conversations I have, if not more, always come back down to anxiety in some capacity with people. And so, if we're just told, well, let's just medicate it, and that way you can function. Like, there's there's points where I had to have medicine. There was moments where it's like I needed something to kind of help, but I didn't want to stay on that. And so the bigger piece of it was, okay, what lies am I telling myself and constantly living in that are preventing me from being able to have freedom from this thing? And so the moment I started to deal with those lies, the moment that I started to deal with areas of my life that I had placed, to deal with anxiety that weren't healthy, when I got rid of that stuff, it became this intimate relationship with God that allowed me just to say, you know what? Yeah, life's really hard right now. Like, this stinks. Like, I hate what I have to deal with, and yet, God, you have me here for a reason. And so instead of just asking God, just take this away from me, I've shifted my thinking to like, okay, God, what am I supposed to learn right now? And that changes, things, because some things God doesn't want to take away. And so if it doesn't go away and we're expecting it to go away, our anxiety increases then because we think maybe I'm not doing something correct to get, maybe I'm not trusting God enough. And so there's been a number of things that I think I've been able to just watch God show me and reveal. And in the process, the capacity in my life, he just keeps opening. Like, I can't even imagine doing foster care 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Right.
And now there's this capacity of, like, we would take a kid, like, life would be crazy. And we'd get an email like, hey, this kid needs taken. And my wife and I would talk, and we're like, I think we could do this. And just when we did it once, it's like, oh yeah, that wasn't too bad. We can do this again. And just more opportunities to be able to be used as I found health just started to open up. And it's been crazy to see, how God has worked and changed. And it became weird not being anxious. I was like, I don't even know how to, like, do this. I was like, I've had anxiety so long. Like, how do I know how to go through life without anxiety? And that's been a new process to learn, honestly.
Well, listeners, today's podcast episode is sponsored by and supported by EFCA East. EFCA East is a district of the Evangelical Free Church of America. This is a phenomenal association of churches that exist to help develop transformational churches among all people. And they do that by helping leaders live well, lead well, and multiply. EFCA East is here to serve you, whether you're in one of our 6 states that make up EFCA East or not. And I'd encourage you to find out more about EFCA East, the amazing programs and support they offer at efcaeast.com. Listen, my church has been a part of the EFCA East for a really long time. We have benefited greatly from it. I can't imagine doing ministry over the last 10 years without being part of the EFCA East. Their support, their help, the encouragement, the time spent with colleagues throughout the district has been so beneficial, not just to me, but to my entire staff. I'd really encourage you to check out EFCA East, get involved. If you're an unaffiliated church, explore what it would mean to join. Maybe even consider financially supporting EFCA East. They are doing absolutely incredible things to create healthy churches and healthy leaders that transform our world. Check it out. Learn more at efcaeast.com.
Okay, I have several questions, but I want to circle back to just like Josh said. I don't know if he said this, so I'll just cut that out. But I know when because obviously Josh has experienced this, my husband has experienced this. I struggle with anxiety, so we're all very familiar with this feeling. But
Yes.
Obviously, your performance at your job is always going to suffer when you're walking through this, and it's an interesting tightrope to walk when you're working for a church. The church is supposed to be a healing place, loving people as you're going through hardships, but you're also like an employee and needing to do a job.
Yeah.
So what did it look like for you at Tristate, and are there things that they did well or that in retrospect that could have gone better? Because I'm assuming that you were not operating at peak performance when
Yes.
this all was happening. So like, what did that look like for you?
That's funny. We just had a conversation about this in a staff meeting, and I was just like, I'm surprised you guys never fired me.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then there's this look that was exchanged. You're like, you guys were thinking of fire. No, there was. I mean, I honestly, I had quite a few conversations of personally that I was concerned. I was like, guys, I'm not in a good place. Like, I want to be at a good place, and I want to keep doing everything that I can to get healthy and to operate in a good place. And so there was a pretty open dialogue about that. And they were like, listen, we got to get help. And so, they're like, you go get counseling. And so they helped me get set up with a counselor, and we tried to figure that out. And the counseling was okay in the sense of, like, I feel like it was really good to talk through things, but then they're like, we also need, like, if there's a physical issue, like, we need to go deal with that too. And so there was this hunt to figure out, like, why am I having 5 years of just these seizures that end up learn that they were all non-epileptic seizures. Basically, my brain just would trick itself into thinking it's having the seizure, and they would happen often. I would have them multiple times a day. And like at youth events and different things where it's like, all right, it's all right, Trent, he'll be back in like a minute.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
Wow.
And they varied in severity and different things at different times. So it's not like it was 5 years where it was every day. It was just, but they would come and go at different seasons. And so there's a real conversation that started to happen of like, hey, we need to work on moving towards finding health. So get help, like go talk to people, like go deal with the stuff that needs to be discussed. There's no shame in going and getting counseling. We're blessed to have, one of our pastors on staff. He's a licensed, or used to be a licensed counselor. I don't know if he still has the license now, but he does tons of counseling, and he's got so much training. And so to be able to have that as a resource and go and talk with him was crucial. And then to be able to go talk to other sources was crucial. And being able to just be open about what you're struggling with was huge. And there's a danger with that, with some in ministry that feel like, man, if I open up like this, will I lose my job? This is a regular conversation. I've had this conversation with so many different people. They're like, I'm scared that if I actually say how much I'm struggling, that the churches, they're going to be like, well, you need to.
Well, let's be honest. There's unhealthy churches out there that would can somebody like fire. They would not be as supportive as Tri Fellowship has been. They would not say, let's seek health first.
Now, I will say there may be some people that need to step back from ministry for a time. And there were some times where I was able to kind of pull back, and I had some leaders who were able to step in at the time. And so I think there's also a dynamic where we need to be honest with ourselves about where we are as well. Yeah. And that's a hard thing to do as well as a pastor who's in a role. And so there were moments where it's like, I felt like I could still operate and do the job that I needed to do, but it probably wasn't being done as well as it needed to be done at different times.
Yeah.
And so
you can step back for time.
Yeah.
And like, so for instance, I started having all kinds of, I've had anxiety issues for different points in my life, but they really kind of like came to a head after my father passed away just a couple of years ago. And I remember going to counseling, and my Christian counselor is phenomenal, said, you need to not do funerals for 6 months. I've experienced a lot of death in close relationships. I haven't always handled it really healthy. It's kind of built into some other stuff, and so he was like, just 6 months, but you need to create that space for you to get well without triggering some of this stuff. So maybe it's just stepping back for a period of time. Doesn't mean it's over.
Yeah. And like you said, it may be certain areas that you are like, hey, I know that this is a trigger for, like, I always struggle planning games. Like, it's always like, you want to kick anxiety out, tell me to go run games for something. I love playing games. That's great. But so we all have our areas that we struggle with, in ministry. That's just like, yeah, this is not the thing I'm good at, but some of those things, they cause more anxiety, and then we can find ourselves just staring at a screen, or just like you can't even get yourself to go do that thing because your anxiety doesn't allow you to go do that thing. It's just like, I just can't. And so there may be things like that you just learn, okay, I can go pass this off. And maybe it's a matter of talking with the staff about, hey, for this many months, can I have pass this off to somebody else to just handle for a season while I regroup? But making sure we're intentional at getting healthy. Mm-hmm. There's so much, when you're able to just stop and comprehend, and it's a hard thing to do, to comprehend just how much forgiveness you have received from our Heavenly Father. That's been a huge part of my process of just realizing just how much grace I have been given from Him, and how much He desires my life to change as a result of that. And so there's been a number of things just to continuously give to Him that has been really exciting to watch, especially in the last 2 years, I would say, of just seeing how there's certain areas that I can just trust Him with, even though I don't know what's going to happen as a result. Foster care especially has definitely helped with that process of trusting. Yeah.
So my other question, and I think both Josh and I are, again, very intimately acquainted with this, is that when one spouse is dealing with this, it is really difficult on your the other person and your family. And what did you learn from that? Where are you and your wife now, and your kids? What are you doing differently now?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Quality of life has increased on an exponential level in our household. There is a real battle of fear that takes place from the spouse who watches the other spouse battle with something like that. I mean, there was some moments there where we're just like, man, I don't know what my health is going to look like. I mean, I had major knee surgery, at one point after having our third son. And then it's like you've got all these seizures. It's like, man, am I going to be able to walk? Am I going to be able to raise these children together? And so there was a real fear that came with that. Now my wife and I, we have an amazing marriage and stuff, but that was a real piece of like wondering, like, man, what is life gonna look like? And so, I started getting into the gym. I started doing things that were really healthy, better eating habits. Though I think this current winter has ruined my good eating habits. Thanksgiving hit, and I was like, you know what? We'll get back to eating well in July.
Yeah.
Um, but no, and I didn't even fully realize the weight that she was bearing on her shoulders for a little while. And we're pretty open. We talk about everything, regularly, but that was something that came up, especially after I found health. Like after I started getting healthy with everything, there was a real conversation that she was just like, man, I wasn't sure what this was all going to look like long term, as far as just the health for, myself and, the quality of life with our kids. And so as a result of this, it's like I can be a better dad. I can not be as reactionary and with disciplining the kids and talking with them. I can help them, as they grow older and probably will face similarities. It's like this is something I'm well acquainted with and can kind of walk with them in and say, listen, you're not crazy for thinking this. But yeah, there was a real tension that I think had formed that I almost became, I think it was normal. You didn't even realize it because this is what we had lived in for so long. It's like I had struggled with anxiety from the very first time that we met. It just, the severity of it had really kind of increased. We're at a much better place now where it's like it really is 50-50. We're loving life. I mean, we are just so excited to find ways that God uses us. Neighborhood kids are at our house all the time. Like we'll have anywhere like upwards of like 15 kids at our house at any given time during the summer.
That is like my worst nightmare.
Yeah, it's great. And we don't have a big yard. That's the part that always blows my mind. Like we have a tiny, tiny yard, but we're always outside and stuff. And so we get to enjoy things. I would encourage pastor, anyone in ministry, any couples, honestly, like constantly move towards health, even if it's in small ways, even if it's taking walks, even if it's getting counseling or different things. If it's you recognize you've got an addiction in something and you need to kick it, like move towards health, have open conversations, and it's amazing what happens. And some of those conversations, they are really hard. They are not conversations you want to have. And yet if God is in it, the freedom that happens as a result of it, you're going to find God is going to do things in your life you would have never guessed. Because when we function at an unhealthy level, we don't even realize how restricted and restrained we actually are.
Maybe this is like something for the parents out there, right?
Yeah.
Like of that maybe you got teenagers or younger kids kind of coming up through. You've seen this a lot. I think I see it in increasing. It's kind of like alarming how much younger children and students are dealing with kind of like these same anxiety issues. Where it used to be a while ago, maybe this was something that kind of like you saw more in adults. Maybe that's because we weren't paying attention, or maybe it's just because kids are dealing with this at a younger age. Do you see that in the students you're dealing with? And is there some advice that you could give to parents to help them either minimize that or work through it or avoid it altogether?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the stat is, but the amount of students that are dealing with some form of anxiety, some form of depression, some form of anything is huge. A number of students will talk about just the fact of having social media and what that creates and causes. Because it's like you do anything and everyone knows about it within, minutes. It's just it's posted, it's out there, everybody checks, we're so addicted to our phone and looking at it. And so not only is there the tension of like expectations that you have with your parents, your teachers, now you have this dynamic of almost realistic or false expectations through social media. And it's like your reputation can just be changed like that from one simple post. And they live and function in that world like this constant bombardment. And so, parents with teenagers, out there, there's the one thing, if you can do this and do it well, and it's going to look different for every kid, it's going to look different for every household, find ways to have conversations with your kids, like open conversations. Now, the number one thing a parent's going to be like, well, my kid doesn't want to talk to me. But if you create an environment where they know they could, that in and of itself is more valuable than you probably will ever realize. If your kid knows that they can come and talk to you in a safe way. And as a dad, it's so hard. Like I'm a reactionary person. Like I struggle with having that quick reaction. And as a parent, you will hear something your kid says and you will want to react. There was a book that I read. I can't remember who the author was. I was taking a college course, and it was titled like how to listen better. I think it's literally like the title of the book. But one of the things that it talks about is when you have that, it's like that moment where your gut just thumps and stuff, and like it basically says like your ears close off, your mouth opens, like you have this moment that your body just physiologically reacts when you hear certain pieces of news. And the book was basically walking through how to not react to your body when it does that. Like when your kid says something that you're like, I can't believe I just heard what you said, or have experienced whatever it is that you just said. Like, how do I not overreact to that and go straight into freak out or yelling and just be a calm listening presence and allow them to just talk. You can potentially, give them a chance to be able to share what they need to. You can circle back to it. You don't even necessarily need to speak into it in that exact moment. You can just say, man, I'm really sorry you've been battling with that. I'm really sorry that you're dealing with that at school. I'm sorry somebody posted that about you, or I'm so like, instead of reacting and like trying to take control, like that's what happens is these kids then they shut down when they see their parent is just going to take over. And I struggle with it sometimes in youth ministry where it's like, okay, just be silent. I don't have to fix this right here and there. And a lot of times the situation isn't something that can be fixed right then and there, but I can circle back around and be like, hey, I know you were sharing about this. Like, how's that making you feel? Like try to dig into like what emotion that they're in. Cause typically like if a kid's angry, anger, it's a secondary emotion. There's something underlying, that is eating that at them. It's usually, whether it's sadness, so whether it's frustration. And so I would encourage parents, don't react too fast to whatever the situation is. There was an article that I know was floating around the E-Free. I know David Borma had sent it my way, but it was how to be a non-anxious presence in the church. And that's a critical, not just, in the church, but that's a huge piece in our homes. How can I be a non-anxious presence in the home to my kids? Anxiety is rampant. I grew up with anxiety. Parents have struggled with anxiety. I've got brothers that struggle with anxiety. Anxiety is riddled through my home. How do I break the chain, of that and be a non-anxious presence to my kids and the students and people that I minister to at our church?
That's very, very good. Thank you for that.
So like we mentioned at the top of this episode, you are one of our cohort leaders for Next Gen, which we're super excited about. And we were talking a little earlier about just the importance of community just in ministry, especially if you're not used to that. If you want to talk about that, maybe how that's played out in your ministry life and why you chose to be a cohort facilitator.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a blessing for those listening that have never heard of what the renewal retreat is. The Evangelical Free has this annual renewal retreat, and it's an opportunity for pastors and their wives, youth leaders and their wives to be able to go all together all over the country, worship together, and just honestly renew, like, take a breather. And in that process, as my wife and I have gotten to do a few of these now, being able just to talk with like-minded people in ministry and be able to share, like, yeah, this is what's happening at our church. This is something I'm struggling with in ministry. This is something I want to encourage you with ministry. There's this beautiful thing that happens when you realize and recognize you're not alone. When David had asked me to step in and help, with the EFC 8 East cohort, for me, it was my hope and desire is that it's going to be an opportunity to help guys not just go Lone Ranger in ministry. We don't want to put something additional on pastors' plates. We've got plenty on our plates already. So we're not looking to create something and build something that's going to be another thing. We want something to create encouragement, to create rest, to be able to have these almost mini renewal retreats, monthly, throughout the year, where you can kind of regroup and get back to it. I mean, that's the purpose of the church, right? We come together to worship, and we get to, praise God in one body, with the hopes that then we can be sent back out, into the world, into our workplaces, into our neighborhoods, into our families, and to minister with intentionality, to point people to God and share the gospel in the spheres that we were given. And so those cohorts are, the design is to just be encouraging. How can we pray for you? How can we walk with you? How can we team up in ministry? Sometimes we try to create things that we have resources in our backyards for. We can do local mission trips, right in our own backyard, or, another, to get creative with it. Well, maybe I go do a mission trip on your steps and you come do one on mine and stuff. If your students really need a new environment to go to, there's ways to just be creative and think about doing ministry life together.
That's awesome. And we're super glad that you're one of our facilitators. We end every episode by sharing something that we are loving right now. Can be silly or serious.
This reminds me of like McDonald's. Isn't that the I'm loving it?
I'm loving it.
McDonald's is not support or sponsor of this podcast.
No, if they wanted to be, they certainly could.
Throw me a cheeseburger.
So anybody can hop on, go first.
What are we loving right now?
Which is a slight nuanced shift from previous
I
season.
like it, though.
I know.
Well, good job, Emily. I love this
little it was
shift.
Partially to peel the, what do they call? I was just going to say something probably inappropriate. I was going to say peel the sausage back. What is it? Share how the sausage is made. I'm sorry.
Oh my word!
I will cut that out. But
this is actually absolutely staying it in.
That we chose. So we recorded all of season 1 pretty much in the span of 2 months. And so the previous question was, what's saving our life? And a lot of ours was like weather related, and then it became null and void for like when these episodes are coming out. So
you wanted to say we're showing everybody how the sausage is made.
Yep. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
You missed, though. It was a huge miss.
Yep. And I am an English major, so.
And this is definitely not getting edited out.
That's fantastic. So, anybody like to share? What are you loving right now?
I'm loving. Well, this is I'm loving baseball season right now. I don't want to be seasonal, but I do know when this one's going to be published, so I can say that I actually. My youngest is big into baseball. My family's all baseball fans. But I actually volunteered at a minor league tryout, kind of like, it's not really a tryout, right? Like the local little league, the younger kids. It's like, man, just seeing the little kids with their smiles when they hit a ball is phenomenal to me. And I love it.
Fantastic. Well, okay, I'm going to jump in because I feel like Trent's will be a lot better than mine. So I'm just going to sneak my weird one in the middle. Okay.
Weird one. All right.
Well, it's not weird. It's just, it's much less.
It's already gotten weird. Just embrace it.
I know. Yeah. Okay. So I was going to say TurboTax. I'm loving TurboTax but this will be irrelevant when this comes out in May. But Tim and I have always paid somebody to do our taxes, kind of an exorbitant amount to do our taxes. And somebody encouraged us this past year, like, hey, just try to do it on TurboTax. Like, they will help you and it's not intimidating. And we got the biggest refund we've ever gotten. Like, I don't know why we were paying somebody else to do it. So that's just really exciting. So I guess I'm going to keep that one.
I would keep that one in.
But that's
this
okay.
podcast is not sponsored by TurboTax. But
again,
hey,
if
TurboTax.
yep, hook them up. It was a delightful experience.
Oh man. All right. So loving life. Honestly, I love the stage of life we are at in parenting. I feel like we're in a bit of a sweet spot. My youngest is 4, my oldest is 9. Probably by the time this will be posted, I guess my youngest will be like a month old. Uh,
Are you having
uh,
another boy?
Having another boy.
Congratulations,
We were
by
so
the
sure
way.
it was going to be a girl. It's another boy.
Yeah,
So
that'll be fun.
now wait a minute. How many boys do you have?
I've got 4 boys. Yeah, this will be our 4th boy then.
I grew up with 4 boys, man. Kudos to your wife. There's nothing
Yeah.
like a mom of 4 boys out there.
She always wanted to be a boy mom, but
They are a special and tough category.
oh, my kids they're great. They're so different. So it's always weird, like when you have your kids and you know how they operate. You're like, what is the next one going to be like? And so there's excitement, I think, in just even knowing and getting to experience. Like, all right, what's number 4? What's he gonna turn into and be like and add to our family dynamic? So
That's
Awesome.
super fun.
Thank you so much, Trent,
yeah,
for
absolutely.
being on here and for
having
being
me.
so vulnerable and transparent. And I took a lot away from this, like that heart issues are always the same, no matter what's changing. Culture's changing. That doesn't just apply to student ministry; it applies all across the board. I love the piece about just being intentional about getting healthy and how that leads to just quality of life and to constantly just keep moving towards health. This is stuff that I hope so many leaders just grab onto some of this stuff and just take and start to like set maybe the bar a little bit different for themselves and move towards some of this stuff. So thanks so much for being on here. Like, it's been an honor. And Emily, it is so cool to be back on season 2.
Yes.
Thank you for hosting this and being our editor. And we don't have a cool way to say goodbye yet.
It
Did you
won't
come
never
up with
happen.
one?
No.
It's never happening. Should I
never
stop
happening.
talking about it?
Season
Maybe.
5.
Season 5.
Season 5, new goal.
Yep.
If they keep us for season 5. Anyway, Trent, man, thanks for being our first guest on season 2. It has been awesome. And to all of our listeners out there, we love you. Thank you so much for listening. You are amazing. Keep going. And we'll just say bye.
Bye.
See you later. The Church Head Podcast is for educational purposes only. We dive deep into important and sometimes sensitive conversations and topics about life in ministry. Please know that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely the views and the opinions of the guests and the hosts and do not necessarily represent the organizations that we work for. Nor should our views or opinions be considered a full perspective of circumstances that may be mentioned in this podcast. Our perspectives are limited, and so will be this podcast. What we hope to do is have conversations and spark greater conversations that will lead leaders and their organizations towards greater health. The Church Chat Podcast is edited by Emily Gardner and produced by Emily Gardner and Josh Ott. The Church Chat Podcast is supported by EFCA East, an Eastern District of the Evangelical Free Church of America, covering 6 states. EFCA East helps leaders live well, lead well, and multiply, helping churches find new vitality and multiply transformational churches on the East Coast. The EFCA is multiplying transformational churches among all people. For more information, visit efcaeast.com. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and can't wait to see you on the next Church Chat episode.